welcome to the 23rd Annual Roaring Lands Banquet.
I am a roaring lamb. I am a roaring lamb, and the time has come.
Mr. Jerry
Take my
Jenkins and Mr. Dallas Jenkins.
Yeah, I am a roaring lamb.
We got a letter we've got many letters from thousands of people who say they came to faith through reading the Left Behind books, and that's better than any royalty check or any bestseller list. But we got one from a family who said that their teenage son was away from the Lord and running with the wrong crowd. And so they bought him a copy of Left Behind, and they hoped he would read it. They didn't want to put too much pressure on him. They just left it out where he could see it. And they kept watching, and the book stayed there night after night. And finally, one night, it was gone, and the light was on in his room. And in the morning, he told them, I read that book, and I'm never going to be the same. I'm going to change my ways. In fact, I'm going to buy a bunch of books from my friends I've been running with and tell them all about this too, so they won't be left behind. Before he could do that, he was killed in a car wreck. And his parents bought books for his friends who came to the funeral. And several of his friends came to Christ through that. As for being here tonight with our beloved son, you can imagine our pride. And I've always thought everything Dallas did was brilliant. This time I was right. And everybody agrees with me. We should have known that Dallas was going to be a filmmaker when he was about 6 years old. He was sitting under the kitchen table, and Diana and I were in the next room, could hear everything he was saying. He was lecturing a Star Wars action figure. He said, you may die in this mission. I said, but you don't want to go to hell because Satan's mean and he won't give you anything. But if you go to heaven, you can ask Jesus for anything you want. And if it's all right with your mom, he'll give it to you.
Thank you so much, Jerry. And I told Jerry earlier, when I read that series, Left Behind, it really changed my life. I was a brand new Christian. I was born and raised Jewish, and I had no idea about the end times. And it was like I opened those books to read them. I immediately was engrossed in this story, but I was also learning about God's plan. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart for writing those books, and I know if each of you could give a testimony, we'd be here all night with the people that have been touched by that book.
The time has come to take my stand.
For the first time, I finally realized that when you do your best, when you make your loaves and fish and you hand them to God, and if they came as a result of God's calling in your life, when you hand them to God and he deems them worthy of acceptance, the transaction is over. What he chooses to do with it after that is not up to you. And that truth changed my life. It might seem obvious, and you may have already learned that lesson. It took me 40 years of living to learn it. And I'm ashamed to say that it took me that long. I'm ashamed to say that even through Bob's book that I wasn't able to glean that obvious truth. That your job is to do what you can for God, but the results are not up to you. And in that moment, my life changed, and I became acceptable. I was accepting of the fact that I might not ever make another movie again. That was okay with me as long as I was in God's will. I genuinely got to that place. Well, now, several years later, The Chosen is doing what it's doing, and it's in every country in the world, and somewhere around 100 million people around the world have seen The Chosen by now, and we've heard of hundreds of thousands of people whose lives have changed and who've given their lives to Christ, including some of our cast and crew. And now when God tells that to me, he says, remember, it's not your job to feed the 5,000. It is only to provide the loaves and fish.